If it plays to your ego, if it plays to someone else's ego, it very likely isn't the higher self. The higher self is unconditionally loving. It doesn't judge, but it also doesn't play to our ego. So that's one of the ways you can tell if the inner guidance you're getting is authentic or not.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I'm a psychiatrist, and I study things on the interface between what people call crazy and what's normal. And the more I do this, the more I see what's called crazy ain't so crazy. And today we're going to be talking about hearing voices, which you tell any psychiatrist that, and you're going to get some antipsychotic pill, but there's much more to it, and we have an expert today in Maureen St Germaine to talk about that with. And I've had a couple of experiences recently, not too recently, hearing the voice of a friend of mine's father who had died. The father had died, telling me things about her, and that when I told her the things he had said to me about her, she was surprised and happy that I knew these things from him, because otherwise I would not have been able to know these things about her. So please subscribe to this channel, send some comments, because I like to respond to those comments, and like our channel, and like this podcast. And please consider buying my book, Meaningful Coincidences, the cover of which is over my right shoulder. It's opening up new territory for humanity. Our guest today is Maureen St Germaine, who has over 25 years of experience in the area of mystical and sacred traditions. She's a practical mystic, a prolific teacher, and facilitator of spiritual knowledge for contemporary life. She's taught in lots of places. Her books have been translated into 12 languages, and they're very popular. And she's appeared on national TV. She's a founder of St. Germain Mystery School and the Akashic Records Guides. She's internationally acclaimed Ascension teacher, and she's been granted access to a dimension that has been closed to most of humanity for eons. Keep that in mind, a direct channel from source. She is continuously researching, developing, and introducing new methods that will help you connect with your own wisdom channel and inspire your spiritual awakening. She's the author of 6 books, and she's also composer and voice of dozens of guided meditations. And she's the proud mother of 4 sons. 4 sons. How'd you do 4 in a row like that? Welcome to the show, Maureen.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's quite the pleasure. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Delight to have you. Delight to have you and be able to talk with you. And yeah, when we've talked before, we've talked about voices, people hearing voices. And as I mentioned at the outset, that's crazy. And people like Winston Churchill reported that he heard voices, and other people of prominence have heard voices, and they've been guides. Socrates had a voice talking to him. It's just not well known out there that famous people who have been very functional, have used voices to be able to manage their lives and be successful. And tell us about how you advise people about hearing voices.
This is, as you say, a very complex subject. And when you are doing your regular spiritual work, meditation and such, it's very common to have some voice come in, like you told the story at the beginning of the show, of hearing the voice of a deceased parent and then conveying that information to the daughter. That's very poignant, and evidence that you could hear something and then convey it beyond the grave. But one of the things that can happen is people can get hijacked. And this is something for individuals to be wary of. So before I tell you how it's done, I would like to share that it is possible, especially in this day and age, with the broader acceptance of voices, to actually be hijacked by energies that want you to behave in a way that's not appropriate. So the simple benchmark is to simply ask, is this of 100% God light or source light, whatever version of a higher power you would accept. It is important to understand that there are cosmic rules. And when you ask this question of a voice that's in our space, it is required to speak the truth. So we are in a free will zone. You and I have eminent domain. We are the final authority in the physical realm. And because of that, we have the right to not only ask, but to demand answers. Sometimes people get visions at the same time. I had a friend who had a vision of a man who, she was just daydreaming at a park bench. And she, found herself in this daydream where this very handsome man came up and said, I have the secret to youth. And this woman was over 65. And he said, I'd like to give it to you. Would you like it? And she said, are you of 100% God light? And the being actually said, well, no, but I have the secret to youth. I can make you look young again. Would you like it? And she basically said, get out of here. So we need to be aware that we can be tricked if we allow our personality to be so excited about the prospect of a voice that we mistakenly allow energies to come in. And so people who meditate regularly often get messages, and they're thoughts. They're not actually voices. But what one of the things I do is train people to recognize the difference between their own thoughts and an outside source. And initially, a person who starts to hear voices often thinks it's all their own thoughts. So one of the ways that you circumvent that is to announce, I only work with beings of 100% God light. And you say that every day in your prayer work. And that way, the likelihood of an energy or entity that wants to say something, but it's not of 100% God light, can't get in, can't have that platform. You are the platform at that point. Now, I can get into how I teach it and what you can look for. But maybe you have a few things you want to say. I've been talking for a while.
I was just taking some notes as you were talking. This is what I was hoping to hear from you, and you've been talking for a while. But I was waiting. Oh, so this is the time I'll go with it. The voice of her father has become a voice that's with me on a regular basis now. We've become friends. His name is Tim, and we like each other. There's a feeling, there's an emotional feeling between us that I am just mentioning this as one variation on what you're talking about, is that you can have a voice with someone who's departed and have a relationship with them without having known them when they're alive. And I wonder what you would think about that.
What I think about that is that man, Tim, is probably another version of you. And that's why the rapport is so yummy.
Would you elaborate on that, please?
Okay. So about 15 or more years ago, I was told that there were multiple versions of each one of us. and that the oversoul had all these separate souls, and that we could be in embodiment at the same time, not sequentially, but in 3D in real time. And then I was shown people that I knew and other versions of them. And I wrote about a number of these people who I encountered, and I got it that the universe wanted me to come forward with this information. So other versions of you often share the same interest or the same passions, or maybe they show the same passion, but then they diverge in another direction from that. And maybe that was something you wanted to do. And I'll tell you one about a very famous author, a medical doctor, who wrote the book, Return of the Revolutionaries. And he was giving a lecture in Seattle, and he was approached by one of my students who said, I have a teacher who says that there could be more than one version of you in this embodiment at this time, and that it would be of service to you or be connected to you in some way. And she asked him what he thought, since he'd written this book, The Return of the Revolutionaries, and he showed how Martha Washington, George Washington, the Jeffersons, all those people who were part of the American Revolution were now returning in embodiment to show up to make sure things worked out. And he said, I absolutely believe in this, because when I was teaching in Hong Kong, a man from India approached me. He also was a medical doctor. And we had an instant rapport. We connected very nicely. And we became good friends. And we discovered that one area of expertise that I was very interested in, but could no longer take on, he had picked it up and started to move in that direction long before we ever met each other. And in another example, a man that had the same birthday as someone else that I knew, and the coincidences are usually the same birthday, maybe not the same year, but the same date. Sometimes they have a similar first name or a similar last name. So those are some of the clues you can see, or sometimes it's a similar heritage. So in this case of this group of men who all had the first letter A as their name, one like Alford, Aaron, like that, all these men with the capital letter A as their first name, they were connected. And at one point, as I was discovering and exploring this, I said to the man who was named Alford, he was a medical doctor, and I was tying him to another man that I knew who had wanted to be a medical doctor, but his parents wouldn't cover the medical school, and so he became a farmer because that's what he knew. So I said to the man who was a doc, and also I knew that the guy who was the farmer also was an engineer type. He built many things, had many inventions that he'd used in his business. So I said to him, you know, I think you might be the same soul as this other man, but do you have a connection? What was your engineering thing? And he said, well, that was my undergraduate degree. And then, because I knew the first man had gone to Hawaii and worked there for a number of years, I said, did you ever take a job in Hawaii? And he said, well, I was interviewed for it, but I chose not to take it. And so these coordinate points kept showing up in comparison. So I make the joke, to kind of summarize this, that you would meet for coffee with other versions of yourself once a month. You want to take the Hawaii gig? What about the opportunity in New York? And play with it and get the idea that other versions of you show up to either reinforce your work or to support you in some way. Let's say an editor for your book is another version of you. Well, they're going to be the ideal person to edit your book, even though that's not their profession, perhaps. So what else do you have in common with this man that you have begun to carry?
Well, the difference from what I'm hearing from you is that he's not alive anymore. And what you just described are people who are existing in this three-dimensional place.
Right, that's true. But it could also be that, someone passes on and they can still build that connection because you're the same soul.
That's how would I know that Tim and I are well, I'll tell you a little bit more, and maybe that's going to help you. Because he wanted me to do some fairly specific things with his daughter. He wanted me to, among other things, he told me that she is very blocked from loving and being loved and feeling love from somebody else. Reasons we all have something like, I mean, it's a common thing, but this was really true of her. And I could tell when I was telling her that this was true of her. I could see the blocks. I could feel the blocks. So 6 months later, we're having dinner on my birthday. And, and among a lot of other things, I'm able to, I say to her that I love you very much. And she, after a lot of times with this, she says, I felt it. I felt it. It was such a wonderful birthday present that after, there was a lot going on before that. I felt it. I felt it. There was that's a musical ring for me, and I can feel it from you, feeling it from me. It's like wonderful. It was so I had accomplished the task of one of the tasks that he had set for me. Others were more. Well, I'll leave it at that. But that's what he and to add to it, he wanted me to help her feel his love.
Kind of like in the movie Ghost, where Whoopi Goldberg agrees to allow Patrick Swayze into her body, and they start to dance. Whoopi Goldberg and Demi Moore start to dance, but she can feel Patrick Swayze, even though it's Whoopi who's supposedly dancing. Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful example of that. And I think sometimes the writers of these fabulous movies are conveying information from on high so that we can begin to understand it.
Yeah.
That's very powerful. And birthdays are very, very special because it's the pullback, like the tide going out up until your birthday, a few weeks before the energy is low. And then as your birthday occurs, there's this big energy improvement of new opportunity, new growth. And so I'll call it the sins of the past kind of fall away and you get a new chance. Excuse me. So that's very powerful to have been able to convey that. And as another version of him, you would be, I'll say, cosmically allowed to be the conveyor of that big love. So it seems very special. In another example, and I feel like the universe wanted me to be sure to carry this message to everyone because it's, like I said, it's a section in my book about other versions of you. I had two men who had studied with me. One man was in New York and the other man was in Seattle. They were both born in Tokyo. One was a tall Japanese kind of guy and kind of, big. And the other one was very petite and a smallish Japanese man, both very atypical. And they didn't have the same first name, but they both chose to go to Egypt on a sacred journey with me. And of course, I would put them together because they had common heritage. But I knew when the second man signed up that they were the same soul. I just was given that information. Now, as a spiritual teacher, I don't believe that it's my responsibility to tell people that you're another version of them unless they ask or it comes up in some kind of conversation and they say, I think this is true. What do you think? So I put these two men together. They were familiar with my teaching about multiple versions of the same soul. And they came to me on the trip and said, we know we're the same soul.
Wow.
And so, you know, and the coincidences that occur. For example, I had another woman I'll call Mary, and she lived in New York, and she was from, I don't know, maybe Costa Rica, and she was married, and she had a lot of family in New York, but her husband had taken a job in Florida, in Miami. And she was terrified because she didn't feel she knew enough about this country to move away from her family. In the same week, we got another Mary who also wanted an Akashic Records reading. So we have two Marys, and my staff mixed them up and thought it was the same person. And of course, the second Mary was in Miami. So in this case, I did ask guidance if it was appropriate for me to tell the two Marys to be introduced to each other. I didn't tell them they were the same soul. I simply asked, you know, can I introduce them to each other? And they both agreed, and they became friends, so that when that move occurred, she had someone to ground with, someone to land with. And it was another version of her.
When you ask permission, tell us about that process. Who are you asking? What entity, what voice, tell us about that, please.
Okay, so before I explain that, I want to explain that there is a way to have accurate higher self connection. So I am asking my higher self, the version of me that's closer to God, closer to source than I can be. So think of your laptop transformer that heats up because you're pulling too much juice from the wall, and it steps down the power. So that's like your higher self. It's fully connected to source, has all the resources, but it's not you. It's not you in the 3D world making free will choices. So when you connect with that resource, it's like having a first-class assistant who knows what you know, knows what you want, and can help you work in this reality or be in this reality with grace and ease. So the higher self connection is very simple. It's 3 simple rules that you practice for 6 weeks that will give you the accuracy that you can rely on, the accuracy that will allow you to make a decision or make a choice that aligns you with your highest good. So the 3 steps are in my app, my phone app called Illuminate, and I'm going to give them to you here as well. But because of all the meditations, we finally broke down and made an app, and it's available on the iPhone and the Google Play. And it's in the wisdom section. So the 3 rules are, number 1, you ask unimportant, insignificant questions of your higher self for 45 days. 45 days is how long it takes to get new DNA. That's a scientific fact, not a Maureen fact. And I'm going to teach you how to get that information in a second. So unimportant, insignificant questions, 40 to 50 times a day for 45 days. The second rule is, if you ask, you must follow through. If you ask, you must follow through. That means if you have an eye for a chocolate chip cookie and you really thinking it'd be good to have right now, don't ask your higher self, just enjoy it. And then the third rule is you set aside all your other divination tools. So no muscle testing, no pendulum, no cards. You set all that aside for 6 weeks. And the reason you do that is because you don't learn German and French at the same time. So the way you operate is you do a little meditation, and we could do that right now to take about a minute. And you ask your higher self to give you a symbol or signal for yes. And it can be a body sensation, like an itchy shoulder or an itchy finger. It could be a sound in your head, like hearing a bell. It could be something you see visually, a shape or a color. Some people actually hear the word yes. And you repeat that And then you ask for a symbol or signal for no, same process. And then the third thing you ask for is a symbol or signal for neutral. Now, 95% of the population can get this right off the bat when you take yourself into meditation and you ask. And then you replicate it. Higher self, is this my higher self showing me yes, yes? So you start out with that. When you're asking about unimportant, insignificant questions and cool stuff happens, that's when you begin to build a history. Normally, humans make decisions based upon historical data. They check, if you're going to buy a car, you check consumer reports, you check the internet, you check your friends. It's all data that already exists. Maybe you test drive, that's still data that now is historical. But you don't have any data, most people don't have any data on their higher self always being right. But when you do this 45-day practice about unimportant things, what happens is you're consistently given information to take action that turns out extraordinarily well, above and beyond. So you ask higher self, is it my highest best good to order this food? No, higher self is my highest best good to order this food. And it turns out with the group of people you're in, the plate you received was the nicest one on the menu. You could ask about what restaurant to go to. And your higher self will say, no to the Thai place, no to the Chinese place, but yes to the pizza place. And you think to yourself, I don't eat bread. Why would my higher self tell me to go to that restaurant? And you turns out they have a wonderful salad bar, and you run into somebody you've been looking for. So these interesting things start to happen. And I have one amazing story that is like the capstone of stories. My then husband and I were on the phone. I was in China, and we were talking about going from San Diego to Los Angeles, which is about an hour and 15-minute drive, to go to the LACMA, the Los Angeles Art Museum, because one of my friends was going to be giving a concert in the late afternoon. My husband wanted to go earlier because the Broad Museum had opened, and he thought it would be good to go there too. I thought it was a terrible idea because I said, I'm coming off of a 15-hour flight. You expect me to just, get a little bit of sleep and hop in the car, eat breakfast in the car, and then blah, blah, blah. And I finished that sentence with, but I will ask my higher self. And if I get a yes, I'll do it with a happy face. I did get told to go. While standing in line, a woman comes up to my line and asks, does anybody want tickets for early entry? I was in a line where I was going to pay extra for the exhibit, one of the exhibits that I wanted to see. Nobody in my line wanted it. So I said, I'll take it. And she said, no, I want it for two people. And I said, well, my husband just went for coffee. I'm happy to take it. So she says, well, you're going to have to follow me back to my line and stand with my family. And I said, okay. On my way back, following her, my guides came in and said, you need to talk to these people. I'm pretty friendly, so I thought that would be easy. And we start talking, and the woman hands me her ticket. And she said, you need to hang on to this because I'm going to go up front and check on something. And if we get separated, you will need this to get in. And I look at the name, and it's a long German name. And I say it out loud. And then I say, I knew a family with this name, but they're in Ohio. And the husband looks at me and says, well, we're from Ohio. And without skipping a beat, his mother, who was with them, looked at me and said, are you Maureen? So Pat, the grandma, turns out to be one of my mother's best friends when they both lived in Ohio. And the last time I had seen her was when I was a teenager. Pat has 6 kids. I was one of 6 kids. I'm astounded that Pat even remembered all of my mother's children. On top of that, we kept running into each other in the museum. And in the course of conversation and standing in line, I said, I have this beautiful apartment in New York City that doesn't get used very much. If you ever need to go to New York, I'd be happy to have you stay there. Well, Mike says, I have 2 daughters in college there. That would be lovely for us. We will take you up on that. A few months later, I call Mike and I say, would either of your daughters like to work for me? My part-time assistant has just taken a full-time job and I'm looking for someone to fill in. And he said, I'm sure one of the girls would like that job. I will get back to you. One of his daughters came to work for me. She was the best assistant I had ever had in all the years I have had help. Later, I was showing my mother a picture of me and Pat. And she said, you know, honey, Pat and your father were first cousins. Her maiden name and my maiden name are the same. I hired my cousin without knowing it. That fills out your coincidence project. All because of my higher self.
That's the point. That's the point. That's the point of this. The cascade of events that you have told before. I can see the spider web of those connections is well ingrained in your head. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story. But it started with, I don't want to go early. I don't want to eat breakfast in the car. I want to like sleep. And no, you ask your higher self, and this cascade of events ensued. It took place afterwards. So it's what's the name of the app that you're helping people do?
It's called Illuminate. ILLUMINATE.
The major go ahead.
It's a purple box with a gold arrow. So it's pretty easy to see there's more than one app called Illuminate. So
this purple box with a gold arrow. For me, who likes shortcuts when possible, the main idea I get is that you have a higher self to which you can appeal. And you have developed a method to be able to do that, which has helped a lot of people. All I do is say, I don't know who it is, but I just ask my questions, and I don't ask about pizza versus what restaurant, but there's always these little kind of hints. Like I picked a restaurant for my birthday that this woman I was telling you about, whose father I communicate with, she really liked that restaurant. And she used to go there with her ex-husband on his or her birthday. I forget. And I didn't know that. There are different ways to get intuitive information. And this is a very direct line, but even feeling it in your body is a kind of intuitive way of feeling it. So the most important thing is that you can ask, you can be open, and you can get information, and you provide a structured way for people to develop that muscle. And that's very important.
And one of the reasons why this is so powerful is because so many people have monkey mind. So many people are mental, and we use the mind so powerfully that we forget that we have another aspect of ourselves that can feel the field and read the field if we would allow it. And what this does is opens that channel in a very direct way. So it's very logical, step by step. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you're in.
Yeah.
And that's pretty special. So that process of connecting with your higher self is very reliable. And I have had people come to me and say, oh, you know, I love your work. I love your books. I've read all of them. But I have a really good connection with my higher self, and I don't need to take any more coursework with you. And when this happened, I just smiled at the woman because I could tell this was not her higher self telling me this. And later in the conference, she came back and she said, I had a reading with one of the other teachers, and she said, I'm channeling a dark entity. And I said, yeah, you didn't ask my opinion, so I didn't tell you, but I could tell that right away. If it plays to your ego, if it plays to someone else's ego, it very likely isn't the higher self. The higher self is unconditionally loving. It doesn't judge, but it also doesn't play to our ego. So that's one of the ways you can tell if the inner guidance you're getting is authentic or not. And like I said before, people who do their work, They're doing their inner work. Obviously, as a psychiatrist, you've done tons of inner work. And so your channel is going to be clear, whether you use a system like mine or your own connection.
I think that there's some truth to that, because I keep working on this thing that's called me, and it's something like that. Now this you were suggesting earlier that Tim is another version of me. And you gave examples of people who are in this 3D reality who find that they're of the same soul. I still have some sense of distinction between me and Tim. And I think some of our connection is we both love the same person a lot. And that his love for her came through me, so that at my birthday, she was also able to thank me for having her experiencing her father's love
In a new way.
in a new way. And it wasn't my telling her that I loved her. It was different. It was other times when we've been together, and I've expressed what her father said to me, among other things. Like he said, he's glad that I am in your life, that he wanted me in her life. And that had to do with she's just amazing capacity, but she was losing respect for herself because of the job she had. And we were able to talk about synchronicity together at a conference in Charlottesville, and she's great. And so that was a bit of helping her increase her self-respect, which I'm so glad when somebody told me that she had told them that she had done that with me. So it was just presented with me. So that was another variable. But he stayed with me, Tim. He's just like a buddy. And the funny thing is, you probably know this, that anytime I would think about him, he'd show up. I mean, if they're all over the place, but the time doesn't matter. As I think about him, he's there. I figured you would know that. One of the things that has happened, though, is that he's opened up a connection between my parents and me, my father and my mother. And it's like the three of them are hanging around watching what I'm doing, and like having comments on it. And so they seem like they're different for me. And that's what that they're part of me. My parents are part of me. I'm part of them, clearly, yes. But just please comment on on this.
Well, first of all, being part of the same oversoul doesn't mean you're going to be identical. It means you start out with the same trajectory, and then in the free will zone, you develop and grow and be who you want to be. And your thread, let's say, has many lifetimes, and maybe his thread has many lifetimes. And by being a direct channel for him, you have expanded his capacity to accomplish something and to narrow the thread of discontent, of lack of love. Because as we become fifth dimensional, it doesn't mean we won't have free will, like a lot of people say. I've been shown that we have plenty of choice. It's just that the not God choice falls off the table. What does that mean? It means you wouldn't say something hurtful, but you might have the ability to say something about what they said, what they think, what they've written, all parts of choice. So as we develop individual aspects of ourselves, and think about how many categories you have encountered in all the interviews you've done and all the people you know, and you think to yourself, oh, I'd like to know more about that, or I'd like to know more about that. Another version of you is taking it up.
What do you mean?
Well, if you weren't an author and you wanted to be an author, but you just never had the time because you were so busy helping clients, another version of you might take that up as a project of writing books. When I was first told this, I was still a young mother. And I remember being told about other versions of me by my guides. And I wanted to be an author. And I remember saying in my prayer work, well, I want to be the first one published of all of us. And a few months go by, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my gosh, if I want to be an author, there's probably another version of me that's already published way more books than I have even thought about. And so it took me down a few pieces and gave me some humility, but it also made me laugh, because think about it. Life is too short to just have one expression. And why couldn't we have multiple expressions doing all the cool things that we want to do? And since we know there's no time except for the present, why couldn't we have more than one version of ourselves in the present?
Well, it seems to me this is what you are trying to get across to humanity here.
In this moment, yeah.
In this moment, because this is not what we talked about the last time we were talking. I mean, you're a very I'll say driven person, and you like it. I mean, it's you got a lot of energy and you want to make stuff happen. And if there's anything you want to make happen, it's you want to alert all of us, and including me right now, to the multiple selves who are different version of myself right here.
And helping you. And you're helping them. Yeah.
And I'm helping them, but they're in this three-dimensional plane. And this is where you and I are talking about somewhat different things. It appears. When I talk about Tim, you're suggesting he is another version of myself. And that distinction between 3D and wherever Tim is like there's a gap there for me.
Yes, but you already had to cross that gap by allowing Tim to communicate through you.
And how does that make Tim another version of me?
Just because he's passed on before you doesn't mean he couldn't be another version of you. Other versions of you aren't necessarily the same age as you. Other versions of you might be another gender. And so what happens is when you encounter somebody that you didn't know, and then there's this yummy connection, and it's not a love affair. It could be a love affair, but it very often is just this close, sweet, mutual love and respect. That very often is a individual who is part of your, I'll call it soul family, and very likely part of who you are. When we come, I mean, think of like a jellyfish that has all those threads. The oversoul is the main body, and then all these threads are you and other versions of you. But you develop distinct personalities, distinct energies. But because you're connected to the oversoul, there are opportunities where your lives might cross. And when they do, usually there is mutual service involved. And that's one of the ways you recognize it. You know, I've got lots of people in my life that are close to me, but only a few of those are other versions of me.
That's so lovely, what you're saying. Mutually of service with each other as an identifier of another version of yourself. And that's happened with Tim's daughter regularly. When we started, and when I asked her to be part of the synchronicity presentation, I said that I think we can be of help to each other. I just knew it. I mean, it's one of those things with you know better than I, but I'm learning it, is like I just knew about her. I just knew about her that we could help each other. And I've had a lot of relationships with women over my life. This one befuddles me. This one is like beyond me. And I've just told people who I'm telling want to hear it, is that I have met my match. I can't get this one. And that would be also part, would that fit with what you think about as, I thought it might.
Yeah, very much so. You know, I walked into a room and this man had his back turned to me. And I felt this huge wave of love. And it befuddled me, like you just described. And I was already in a relationship and in love. So I didn't think it was about that, but it was big like that, maybe even bigger. And the man turned around and I realized it was a man of color. And I was even more befuddled. And then when I began talking to him, I discovered he had the same birthday as my father. And there were all these synchronicities. And I realized that I was feeling my father's love for me.
Yeah. Now we're talking. Now we just, because her father's love for her was coming through me as you were experiencing your father's love through him.
Mhm.
That's wonderful. I mean, this became almost unbearable for me to feel the love I was feeling.
Uh-huh.
She does breath work, and I went to a breath work. That these details don't matter so much, but she touched me on my right shoulder the first time I was there, and I was ecstatic just from her touch. That was my first experience for what I could call divine love. It was so beyond joyful. There was no words for it. Ecstatic, crying, trembling. It was like, and then subsequently, I had all this love that was around her. It's not just her. I
Pouring
know
through
that.
you.
And pardon?
Pouring through you. Pouring through you.
Pouring through me, pouring through. It was like one of those fire hydrants you opened up. Pour, pouring through me. Thank you. That is exactly what it was. It was pouring through me. So 3 strands: divine love, as best as I could understand it, which, and her father's love, and then my love, which I didn't know. I mean, it just was just getting to know her, but it all started right from the beginning. It was just love at first sight kind of thing. It was like it was there. But then all of this, I've had to have a lot of discipline to manage the intensity of that love flowing through me. Been it's been a real challenge.
Well, you know, I will tell you, I had a similar, less intense feeling when I first connected with you. And so you have this respect and honoring of who I am. But I felt there was like this energy. And so, you know, it was a lovely, juicy feeling. And I wasn't trying to make anything of it, but it felt really nice. And it felt especially nice when I would think of it. So I can appreciate that. Um, but I feel like mine was like this and yours is like this. So
It, it's yes, yeah, yeah, yes. And I look back over our previous interview, and especially the beginning, and it was so much fun with us. It was it was just a lot of fun. So that's wanted to be able to talk with you again because it was a lot of fun, and I was feeling something like what you're talking about, and what you're talking about, this feeling that I can love you and you can love me, and we can say that to each other without it having the extra stuff around, well, we got to do what's this and that around it, but just to be able to feel it and say it, which now I've been able to do with 2 other people, that this is a love thing going on here. But the foundation of this, Maureen, is the love I carry around for this woman I've been telling you about.
that's
It's in,
fantastic.
it's
Well, I think that as I hear you describe it, you know, we know that the realm of 5D is, I'll call it rapidly approaching. And when I describe it to people, I say it's like a sine wave. We move up into it and then we slide back down into 3D and polarity and judgment. Then we move up into it and then we slide back down. So I see it as a sine wave, but that there's still an angle, you know, moving up, up, up like that. So I think that these experiences are the platform of unconditional love we will eventually carry for all of humanity.
The fact that you're talking about a sine wave on the way up, and I've never heard anybody say that because I've said that. I mean, that's why I was going like this when you were telling me about it, because I was doing I'm on the same trajectory. I understand that.
That's awesome. Well, then that means you're in my new book that's
That
coming
means
out
I'm
in September. In
what's
September.
December, September?
September. Mm-hmm.
Inner Traditions?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Inner Traditions. It's available for pre-sale now.
Why don't you give us the name of it?
It's called Mastering Your 5D Life.
And part of that mastering, I am hoping, is being able to feel this love that's all available to us and be able to experience that love with multiple people.
It is. It is. And I try and explain it like electricity. Now, those people who know about electricity know that electricity moves in a magnetic and electric wave, but they're
perpendicular to each other.
Right. At 90-degree angles, and they are attracting and opposing, repelling at the same time. So the trajectory looks like this.
Yeah.
So again, it's that sine wave thing, but the magnetic pushes against the electric, which causes the movement forward. It propels. And that's what makes electricity move along the wires. So as we think about our evolution, we're becoming our higher selves. Each of us is becoming that. And there will be a generation, and I expect to live for this, so it's going to be within my lifetime, is humanity will be evolved enough to fully embody their higher self, which means we will be walking around as ascended masters in this reality, which has never been done before.
Well, we got to do something like that right now. It's like it's an essential. So I am suggesting that synchronicity is a part of that upward trajectory that can help people tune in to what else is going on around here.
I agree. It's a way for everyone to get it, that they've made good decisions and that whatever it is that's going on is important to pay attention.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, an opportunity to shift and evolve. And sometimes people make decisions that they feel like in their heart is the right one, but then they get afraid, or then they second guess it. You know, it's a common thing for people to make a big decision and then have buyer's remorse or something like that. But when we have the synchronicities, we don't worry about that anymore. We let all that regret or self-recrimination go away.
Well, that's very much a lead in to the person I'm interviewing later today. We're going to talk about false synchronicities, ones that are created by political, economic forces in America and other places, where it looks like a meaningful coincidence, but it's made to fool people. Is what? Manufactured. It's manufactured. Yes. What do you think about that?
I think that's totally in alignment with what I was talking about with a false guide in your head. There are forces that would prefer that we not evolve, and those forces are constantly influencing the reality in ways that we need to practice discernment. And we practice discernment by doing our inner work, you know. So I totally agree with whatever it is coming that you're going to be talking about with that lady.
Oh, she lives in Tucson, by the way, which isn't too far away from you, but it's far enough.
No.
It's
Yeah, I'd like to meet her. I get to Tucson frequently because my sister lives there.
well, her name is Michelle Stiles, and her book uh, is One Idea to Rule Them All.
Ah,
And I'll send you a review of it, which is where
okay.
how I got to it. And it's an astounding book for me because it shows the deception of moneyed political powers putting onto the American mind, and it's true
Okay.
about other places too, psyche. Uh, what I'm looking at that for is how can we who have ideas about the positive evolution of humanity also have an influence on the mind of Americans, the mind of the people of the world, beyond writing books and having discussions like this, but a larger movement that can use some of the ideas maybe they have, but to get meta about the human mind, which means for me getting into the psychosphere or mental atmosphere and somehow doing something that's along the lines of what you are doing and what I am doing with many others. But it may, now that I'm talking to you, I think there's a coordinated effort that's going to be needed by people who want to ascend and help humanity ascend.
I think that people who take the time to acquire the higher self connection, whether they do it the way you did it or the way I teach it, those people are setting the stage and their vibration allows other people to level up. We know the clocks resonate in a
Oh,
room.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so our presence is going to help others level up. That's the first thing. And I think that these are all opportunities for us to step out of judgment. I will tell you that I asked my guides a while back, many years ago, was there anything that I was doing that was keeping me from being in 5D? And they said, yes, the way you drive in San Diego traffic. And you can imagine, somebody pulls in front of you or whatever, and I would make a comment. Now, I would never use swear words, but I would say, well, that guy's an idiot or that's stupid or. And so when I was told this by my guides, which had never occurred to me, I decided to start blessing those people and asking the dragons or the angels to help them get on their way and making up a story. Well, maybe they didn't see me, or maybe they need to get to the doctor, or maybe they're an emergency. And so I changed my MO on it so that I would step out of that judgment because I didn't realize that it was pulling me back into 3D. And what made my driving somewhere more important than theirs.
Excellent. Excellent. That's such a wonderful metaphor, really, for the way we wander through our lives. And it has a lot to do with judgment, and judgment has to do with expectation. And expectations have a lot to do with what we think should happen. And giving that up has been part of this process with the woman I've been telling you about, where she's made it really clear I shouldn't have any expectations of her, and because she's a sovereign and sovereign, I go, okay, so I just don't. And how, and one of the things that I said earlier to her when the beginning of this is that I want to be in your life, but however it is, I'd like it to be the way you want it, not the way I might want it. But how you want it. And then if it fits for me, then we can do that. And we have gotten to the place just this week where we can be okay with each other without having to a lot of like blah, blah, blah going on. So I'm not, I love telling you about this because it's happening right now. And I think we're going to have to stop, but I do have a question or a comment I'd like to hear you say something about, because uh, there's something here that I'm trying to understand and utilize that I think that she's been in my life as I've been in hers to help each other.
Right.
And that she's helping me with my synchronicity thing, which is to get it out into the human mind more more boldly and more usefully. And I, and I think I've been able to help her. And I had these images of her and me giving talks together, and the love between us would affect the people around us, and they would feel it. And after this session, I talked to a woman who was not affected. She was negative about it after I had that experience, felt that she and I were doing that then. So that was kind of a wake-up call in a way, but it wasn't because other people were experiencing something special in that group. But she's leaving for China in 3 months, and she's going to live there. And so after this year of having this experience of developing this with her, she's going away, and managing that grief has been so much a part of what I have to do as part of my own evolution. And I have a feeling. So
stay in the
what?
present. Stay in the present. You don't need to grieve yet.
Oh,
you
it's fun.
are moving. I know. But this is something that I also went through. I started grieving about the loss before it was gone. And although grief will come, if you spend any moment not in that place of yumminess and love and appreciation, you're missing out.
Well, I agree with that. And what I'm doing is finding ways to enjoy the grief.
Oh, I don't think you should do that.
Really?
Yeah, really.
It's so
really,
educational.
Because you're not living in the present. And the present is what you have right now. And in 3 months, something could change. In 3 months, you might decide you want to move to China. You can do your show anywhere. Why not in China? I've lived in China, as you know, for a month at a time for many, many years, 4 or 5 times a year doing that for a month. So she might go there and decide she doesn't want to stay. You just don't know how that's going to play out. And, worse come to worse, what about if something were to happen to you or her and you didn't live in the fullest present of the juiciness of the now? And you can figure out ways to enjoy the grief later.
Well, I actually grieved a couple of months ago when I found out she was probably going to go, and it was very intense. I mean, it was hard. I had another friend of mine helped me through it. I chipped a tooth eating a veggie burger at Applebee's while I was going through the grief.
Okay, so listen to this, that your teeth stand for your belief systems.
No.
Yeah. They're like when people have a root canal, they lose a piece of their tooth. You're changing your belief system. You're unhooking from a belief system that you have held to a new belief system.
That's really true. That's really true. That is really true.
So I don't know, when is this show going to air?
About a month.
Okay. Very good.
I'll let you know when it does.
Okay.
I'll let you know. And we need to stop because I got to go and you got things to do, I guess. You usually do. So Maureen, thank you very, 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 very much for talking with me. It's really fun. It's really good fun.
I appreciate you and I love you very much as well. And I can't wait till we do it again.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.